speak about our game. And so definitely excited to introduce you to our giant owl here. So it's Ava, and then we have Kana in the front here. And we just introduced the studio, so I'm not going to go through that. But we do have some photos of everyone for you to look through. And there's a few things we wanted to get through tonight, right? So first, we want to talk about the Aqueous Launchpad program and encourage you to be a part of it. Because the applications are going to come through the fall, and every single one of you should apply to be a part of it and participate in it. And so Justin will be talking about like what that process was like when he went through it, and when Min became a grant recipient in Aqueous Launchpad in 2019. And then we'll talk about like the game itself, talk through our art pipeline. So that's getting, how do you go from having something inside your head into something that's playable that the user can then interact with. And there's a lot of challenges that come with that, right? So it's not just like the bringing the imagination to life. VR is hard. It's one of those things. And so the really cool part of this talk that you get to kind of experience is there are known practices for testing virtual reality, and those don't work when there's a pandemic. So we had to do some pretty creative adapting in order to test our game with people during a pandemic to get feedback instead of bringing our entire production pipeline to a halt. So we'll talk about that as well. And at the very end, we'll save it for questions. But for now, I'm just going to go ahead and hand it over to Justin Palmer, our creative director.
Hey everybody, I'm Justin Palmer, like I just said like a minute ago. I guess we can just start this crazy story at the beginning. So I was in Oculus Launchpad 2019. For those of you that don't know, so Oculus Launchpad is basically an incubator program that focuses on like diversity and inclusion within the VR industry as a whole. Basically, they have an open application. They usually do it in the first half of the year. The timing changes somewhat. I know for my application, the deadline was like mid-August or something, and then I found out late August that I got in or something. But from the applicant pool, they select 100 developers, and at least before COVID, they flew all of us out to California. There was a boot camp, a two-day boot camp, and then we all got to go to Oculus Connect, which was great. And then we had a 3-month development cycle to create what's known in the industry as a vertical slice. So if you think of like a game or an application as a cake, your vertical slice is quite literally that. It is a slice of that cake. So everything in that slice is basically feature complete. Yeah, it's kind of like its own, basically a demo. But I found out about the Oculus Launchpad program from Catherine Hicks, who I later asked to help me with my project. So Catherine, I hate to put you on the spot. I know you were in Launchpad 2017, wasn't that right?
Yep, Launchpad 2017. Yeah.
That's cool. Do you want to add anything about like I don't like maybe about your experience with the program or like your thoughts?
It was really great. They also flew us out. This time it was at Oculus's headquarters, and it was like a mini boot camp, like what Justin said. It's a fantastic program. Highly recommend any and everyone to apply. Don't be afraid if I technically applied last minute, got in somehow, but like do it. And you develop you also have like a great network of people, and it's just awesome. So
yeah. I want to echo two things. One, the apply. Holy crap, just apply. I didn't think I was going to get in either, and I somehow managed to get in. So that's how this whole roller coaster started. But two, the networking opportunity is great. At Oculus Connect, now known as Facebook Connect, or as I like to call it, FaceCon, and I'm never going to stop saying FaceCon. I ran into John Carmack, and I freaked out a little bit. That was awesome. But that's neither here nor there. So here are just like a couple of photos from Launchpad. Again, you can see, it was a very inclusive environment. Like, I'm a raging introvert. I hate talking to people. and it was one of the most fun weekends I've ever had. It was great. And also on the right, that photo on kind of in the bottom right hand corner where it's Catherine and myself, that was actually a demo day, so that was at the end of the 3 months, and we got to pitch our game on stage. I had a heart attack that day. It was great. I hate public speaking. But yeah, that's kind of the gist of the Oculus Launchpad program. You have 3 months to make something awesome, and then you get to pitch it at Oculus headquarters, and it's an amazing experience. So what did I make? So I'm a little bit of a game jam junkie. I really like the time constraints. I really like going in blind and not really not knowing what's going to come out of that pipeline. And I kind of took the same approach with Oculus Launchpad. So when I applied, they ask you, what is it that you want to make? And I basically said, I don't know, man. I just want to make VR stuff, which is good enough for them somehow. So I went to the boot camp, came home, and I started just like kit bashing stuff together in Unity, and I made like one or two like really small demos that were just literally thrown together. I had some other ideas written down in my notebook. I had an idea for like this rhythm-based dungeon crawler that was very kind of like Beat Saber-esque, but instead of like dubstep or whatever Beat Saber uses, it was going to be like Viking metal or something. Then I shelved that because it was going to be a scope nightmare. And then I got really bummed out because I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I had already wasted like 2 or 3 weeks of my development cycle just working away on ideas that didn't go anywhere. And then at a work event, we start me and my coworkers were talking about how everything was coming together, and Too Long Didn't Read. I came up with this idea of an asymmetrical VR game. So one player in a VR headset and then another player on a monitor. We've lovingly started calling that a pancake player. So yeah, that really small idea eventually turned into Mend, and I'll kind of touch on how the team formed after that. But yeah, and so Mend is an asymmetric cooperative platformer. The two players work together to do that blurb of text that I'm sure you've already read. So Craig, if you want to go ahead and kick that over. Yeah, go ahead and play the video, and then I'll kind of tell the story about how we got there.
Cool. So I'm going to stop sharing real quick so I can get sound, because I'm not sharing the sound right now.
There we go. Okay, so that was the demo day trailer for our vertical slice that we ended up making. So I left off with how I landed on the idea of Mend. Basically, I just kept ideating. I didn't really touch on team formation. After I actually landed on the idea, I had my Nick Fury moment of going out to all my local contacts that I've worked with before. It's like, hey, you want to make a video game? And I managed to trick everybody on this call into making a video game with me. So thanks, y'all. But yeah, no, I do kind of pride myself at being a generalist. I know enough about everything to be dangerous, but the way that I tackled team formation was to basically bring in specialists. So Shrek is my engineer. He took care of so many engineering problems that were just quite frankly over my head. Elliot and Catherine are both amazing artists. Desmond as well. We brought him in. So unfortunately, we were limited to a maximum of 5 total people during Launchpad. So I couldn't bring Desmond in yet, but I did rope him in eventually. And then of course, Jonathan Marlin, who does all of our music custom from the ground up. So thank you everybody for helping me. I love all of you. So anyway, actually onto this slide, and I will kick it back over to Elliot here.
Question?
Oh yeah, what's up?
So did you apply yourself and then you were able to bring on +4?
Yes, that is correct. So when I applied to Launchpad, it was just me. There was no digital precept in the picture, even though that's what it eventually turned into. I do know that there were some dev teams that applied as a team, but I feel like they were kind of the exception and not really the norm. Launchpad is all about, I feel like they're targeting not quite like level 101 developers, but maybe like level 102 or 103 even. I don't know. But to answer your question, it was just me. And then I roped everybody else in. But anyway.
Wait, Justin, can we ask one more?
I have one more.
Yeah, go for it.
So I'm guessing you guys have a lot of ideas floating around in your heads about what sort of games could be fun, you know, like hundreds of ideas. How do you sort of narrow down to one idea? Because that's like...
That's kind of a big question. Really it just comes down to playtesting, because like one of the ideas, so going back to the dungeon crawler idea, like I prototyped up like some nunchucks, and I was playing around with it in VR, and it felt okay, but there was going to be a lot of tuning, and it was just like one weapon, and I was like, I planned out 3 weapons because I had this like rock, paper, scissors idea in my head for, you know, like enemies' strengths and weaknesses and whatnot. So a lot of it is like, what's going to be, you play test it. So you build something, you play test it. And that kind of gives you an idea of whether or not it's fun, even though it's a very subjective thing, but you know, you can rope other people into playtest. There was another point that I was going to talk about, but I just completely forgot about what it was. Let me get back to you on that. I want to get this slide out of the way because I feel like I'm taking up too much time. But anyway, I just want to talk about men's design pillars really quick. So that was another thing they harped on at the boot camp, was that first pillar, accessibility, not so much simplicity, but accessibility. I actually handed out these flashcards. They're the Able Gamers accessible player experience flashcards, APX flashcards. You can pick these up on Amazon for I think like $10. These are great. These are like the Jesse Shell's game design lenses, but you know, for accessibility. These are great, get them. So yeah, simplicity and accessibility. So that goes for both players. The pancake player, they only need the analog sticks to play the game, as well as like a button to jump. There was a sprint button, but we took it out because it didn't really add a whole lot. It doesn't really do much. And the same for the VR player. Like, yeah, they have their motion controllers, but they only need the grip trigger to, to interact with the world. And that goes for the Locomotion system and like all the interactables in the game world. The next pillar is exploration and problem solving. That's big to me. Finding ways to draw the players into the world is it's a fun and challenging design experience, and I think there's a lot there. Teamwork and collaboration. It's very clearly a co-op game, so obviously that's one of our pillars. And then non-violent gameplay was our final pillar. And I'm glad we have that, because at demo day, I specifically remember somebody play testing it, and they were like, wow, this is really good. I could play this like with my 5-year-old daughter. And that really stuck with me. So I had played around with the idea of, you know, maybe including some enemies like Mario that you can like jump on, but it's purely just going to be about exploring the world and just that. So sorry if I rushed through those design pillar slides. I just wanted to make sure everybody else could speak. Elliot, I think the next slide is art, so I'm going to let you pick this up.
Thank you. Yes. So as far as when you get an idea that that you decided on, essentially what it came down to is that Justin just kind of came up to me like for the initial pitch, and he was like, "Hey, I got this idea for a game, and like let's go for it, and like help me make it look a little nicer for the demo day." And I was like, "All right, cool, let's do some stuff." I had experience making game art before for other not for non-VR things, but so this was an interesting sort of test of those skills. And what we came through with the initial concept art was very much a product of the time that you had when you do it. So if you plan, of course, if you plan, you'll be able to do a lot more. But we were just sort of just wide-eyed young kids trying to do it, and last minute, and we got a very solid thing through, I think, pretty quickly. But when it comes to the one after the grant was awarded, we had to kind of go back through a lot of it and really kind of approach it from this kind of a pipeline, which is you start with the core concept for whatever piece it is, whether for a lot of it like this, like you'll see coming up, it's like a level, like a jungle level, and it'll probably just be a bunch of blocks that that are given to you by the level designer, in this case Justin, and it'll be your job to take that from that stage, from that like rough idea of like the player can run around and they've been testing gameplay, to some state that looks presentable and visually pleasing. And this is typically how you would do it. You would start with a general paint over, like you'd start with like just like sketches, rough sketches, coming up with ideas for how an area would look. And in doing so, coming up with like, this is kind of blue sky. This is kind of like, well, could we have a temple here? Could we have torches here? Could we have, what does this puzzle look like? Like really, like what is it in this world that moves like that? And from that point in time, you decide on a couple of different directions, and you'll take them a little bit further. You'll maybe do like a full color, maybe like sort of exploration of some of these ideas. Here you can see some of the early sketches for like the jungle area in the bottom left. Some character concepts, the bottom right and the upper left, and just a random piece of architecture that we would later use for a gate. It's about sort of finding like a visual style that you're going to be comfortable with, and that you can that everybody in the team can kind of match, and makes it hit the right tone that you're going for. So the bottom left, that was very much early days last year, trying to develop like what kind of temple does this look like? Is it like a brand new temple? Is it like a overgrown temple? What is the storyline there? And
and
Elliot, how did you settle on the theme of like the kind of Aztec theme, or like the theme that you eventually settled on?
Okay. That was definitely early discussions with Justin, sort of like about the intention, because I think early on, I think Justin, you had the notion that it was sort of like a tomb exploring kind of thing, where like there were these adventurers kind of going through a tomb, and I think we sort of try to like back and forth that, we took a lot of inspiration, I think, early on from like the movie Atlantis, and sort of like a magical culture. And I think we ultimately decided that we would want to sort of tell a story within that culture that was like two people from it experiencing a story happening. So we looked to a lot of Mesoamerican cultures altogether: Aztec, Olmec, Mayan, and kind of we're trying to piece together a lot of elements to kind of make this world sort of feel cohesive and a little something different than you maybe normally have seen. And so yeah, this was an early concept right here. where and Desmond we'll talk about this later, but scaling was sort of an early problem we were having. You know, we knew that we wanted the VR player to be bigger. We knew that the person with the controllers was small and running around, but getting a feel for how big that person's going to be in a space, and when they're in that space, what does the world around them look like? How high are the walls around them? Is it like super high to the small player? Does it look too big? That was a lot of this early stuff, was trying to get a feel for the virtual space and like how to kind of naturally gate players by having things that fit within the environment. And things like, you know, if you miss a jump, is it just an abyss, or is it like is it water below? You know, a lot of stuff like that we kind of were toying around with. Another example here, this is the second level, which is a cenote, an underwater kind of cave. And this was actually before any block out at all. This was an early thing where I was like, well, what could this? We knew it was going to underground cave. What could that look like? And that was my job to sort of take what we wanted, what kind of elements we knew were going to be in there, what kind of tone we wanted to hit, and just you know, throw it at the wall, see what happens. Trying to get like a color palette out of it. Try to get like natural sources of light, natural sources of you know, obstacles throughout the level. You know, so settling on these sort of like broken ruins that are kind of like starting to stray away a little bit from the typical Mayan ruins you might have seen, or the Aztec ruins, and move them into slightly something a little bit different. And that's sort of like the path that we start taking here. But also what's important is that once you get something like this in a game, you can break it out. You can break it out into useful pieces that a modeler or a texture artist can get to work on. You know, so you can start saying like, well, okay, well, you had this brick wall here in the back, and that looks like a tileable texture. We can make it like a tile texture out of that. Looks like we're going to need some vines, and, you know, just general vines we're going to put around everywhere. Maybe a cave wall that we can tile horizontally, and you know, you'll start noticing a lot of prop assets that you'll need. Like, for instance, this brazier in the front here with this, you know, with the two flames on it. Like, okay, well, that's clearly something that I just kind of pulled from reference, you know, in mocked up in here, and it looks, if we like how it looked, and we decided to break that out for a modeler to make. And so I had to make a breakout piece of art so that a modeler could tackle that piece individually. And you'll get to do all that kind of stuff when you kind of break out your concept art into usable assets that you can get a lot of mileage out of. Yeah. And so here you go. Here was an idea here. So we, from that last piece, we're like, okay, well, we want to have one of those kind of torches. So, you know, you start playing around with different kinds of ideas for what you want that to look like. And, you know, it's anything different from different kind of brick styles to different sort of sculptural pieces, trying out different materials and different sort of states of condition and decay. And, you know, the main point with this and with any of the other concept art that you hand to a modeler is that you really want to make sure it reads well enough for them to be able to easily make that in 3D. You know, there's not a lot of questions. So that becomes very important the more you make this kind of work. I think that's pretty much it for that one. And you can get, and Des, you can jump in here and talk about how it was for the modeling process.
Yeah, appreciate it, Elliot. And I'm just going to reiterate on how great it is to have a plethora of options in the concept art stage. Like if you go back and see how many Elliot concepted, it really does help at this stage to actually have a little bit more fun. So this was a, like, you know, relatively straightforward model. We're going for low poly. This, our game is, with the Aqueous is essentially a mobile device. So we want to use as little as possible. And that was what I was trying to do here. And, but yeah, Elliot made it easy. All I had to do is go in here and I know you guys are at MIT, and my assumption is there are not a lot of artists in the group. So if you guys haven't opened up Blender and made a 3D model, I would just like invite you to. It's honestly way easier than people think it looks. I mean, so if you haven't, go ahead and do that. But yeah, not a lot to say here. My program of choice is Maya because it is super. It takes away all of the tech and just lets me create. And here's Substance Painter, where I brought it in to texture it. All right, so in Maya, you unwrap your 3D model into a single image, and Substance Painter makes it easy to paint directly on that model. And I mean, it's just like, super easy thing to do. When it comes to this line of work, there's a lot of different software, there's a lot of different things. And it's, I would again make a suggestion to try out as many and be aware of what's new and cutting edge. But again, at this stage and at our level, our low poly game asset style, what I tried to do here was create some depth with the painting, so I did not have to put it into the model. So a lot of the shadow on the diagonal lines, was made in paint, so it's not a texture. It's, there's shadow underneath and crevices, all that stuff to prevent it from having to be more geometry. That'll slow the device down. I can go to the next slide. Yeah, and then it's time to put it in game. So I do test out my assets by dropping them into Engine. So here it is in Unity. But I believe it was Justin, you brought this particular asset into Unity to play with the fire and get the material. Like all that stuff is things that I test when I'm bringing in assets to make sure they look right. But it's up to the game designer to actually implement them. So if you want to talk about that, Justin.
I mean, so I can speak to that from like a level design perspective. So, and I'll try and keep this quick. Also, I realized that I completely forgot to answer the whole grant winning question. I promise I will answer that at the end of this. Yeah, no. So from a level design perspective, it's all about creating spaces with purpose. That's kind of my own definition. If you have pieces of geometry that like the players get hung up on, or like if you have pieces of geometry where the players can like climb up where they're not supposed to, and then all of a sudden they're out of bounds, those are just always things that you have to be cognizant of. So it's always good to whatever art final art assets you decide to bring into the engine, to just play around with it, make sure the players can't do anything unintended. And that's really kind of the point there. And then of course, yes, you do have does it look good? Which of course I lean into my artists more for that than anything else. But yeah.
Yeah, and go ahead.
That there was a VFX test going on in that same shot.
Oh yeah, I completely forgot about that. Yeah, it was like the fire, like the two different particle systems.
Yeah, and I also want to, and Catherine, if there's anything that I missed on the art part that you would, like to jump in on.
Yeah, I guess when you're modeling, especially for more of like a 2D style look, you want to keep your poly count low, like Desmond said, and you're painting on, like, again, I'm gonna repeat a lot of what you said, Desmond. You're painting on your details. and you're also like translating as a 3D model, you're translating some of that concept art into like a 3-dimensional form. But again, yeah, like get your feet wet with like 3D and texturing software. Like, yeah, again, Blender is great. I call it Blender butter or Blender crack or whatever, but it's really good software. And I know there are some other free softwares that you can use for texturing as well, but like Substance Painter is pretty good too. It's like a lot like Photoshop, but painting on top of the model, directly on top of the model. So yeah.
I
Yeah.
just want to jump in for 2 seconds. I'm so sorry, Des. I just want to reiterate everything that's been said about Blender. I feel like if you have this this mindset of I am a programmer or I'm an artist or I am a game designer, and you silo yourself into being only that one thing, you're setting yourself up for failure. I feel like it's immensely valuable to kind of almost be a jack of all trades, master of one. They call it being a T-shaped resource in the corporate environment. But yes, no, it's always good to have other skills. And Blender is free. It's great. They just did a UI overhaul, so it's much easier to use. It's great. Use it.
Do we have a
All right.
question, Trent?
I'll shut up.
Do you have a question from the audience?
Yeah, I have a bit of a question. So, like, specifically towards the be a jack of all trades thing. Like, I've also been told the opposite from another person in the game industry. Like, generalists don't survive. That's what they told me. So it's like there's a bit of nuance here, isn't there?
Yeah. So that might be true on the AAA level. If you're actually applying for like a position, you can't really apply as a generalist. But in an indie studio, everyone wears many different hats. And you have to learn a lot of different things and a lot of different skills. So for a studio like ours, a generalist, I wouldn't even call him a generalist. I feel like he's a level designer and like a creative director who happens to be able to do everything. And that's like, yeah, so I would say it's more like not really being a generalist, but having your skill set and then just being able to do everything else, like at least competently. And that's actually something that if you ever want to work in an indie studio, there actually are people who only hire someone who can build a game from beginning to end by themselves. Like there are indie studios that do that. So it depends what type of studio you want to work with as to whether or not that statement is actually true. But on the generalist, like kind of thing, it like on the AAA level, that statement is probably true. But for indie studios, like everyone needs to be able to do a little bit of everything, and like jump in and help out where you can.
I can chime in on the corporate side of that. I've done VR and AR training for 5 years. And so on that side of things, like, yeah, no one's going to hire a generalist. But what I would say it's the argument really comes from, you are going to specialize in one thing. That's true. However, if I'm trying to I'm trying to round out our team with like another programmer, for example, and I'm going to ask them, it's like, have you ever worked with Blender? I don't want them, and I will never ever have them do Blender. I will never have them make 3D models or expect them to UV unwrap something. But if they're going to be working with the game engine, they're going to have to incorporate 3D model assets into this pipeline. They're going to need to know their way around it so they can diagnose problems from the programming and engineering side of things. Same thing, like you flip that paradigm, like if I'm hiring an artist, I'm probably going to ask them, hey, do you know a little bit of code? Do you know how to use Unity? I will never expect them to code. I'm never going to expect them to use Unity, but I would hope they should be able to say, drop something into Unity so they don't have to rely on someone else to test their product for them. So it's,
Right.
I'm not really saying like be a generalist. It's like, yes, have your specialization and be like super, super good at it, but don't pigeonhole yourself, because then you're only going to hurt your own skills. And that's my
And
soapbox.
Trent, you had a question from the room?
I don't think we did, actually.
Okay,
We're just discussing things. We're not.
Cool. Awesome.
All right, thank you.
All right. Yeah, and so for those, like, I feel like people who are new to game development aren't familiar with the idea or concept of blocking out a level. But basically, you don't want to come in and you do your entire game and have it finish and have it look really pretty, and then just now finally test it and find out that it's terrible for the user to come in and play. So instead, you have someone like Justin come in and actually block out a level. So I'm going to pass that over to Justin to actually talk through what that process is and what that looks like.
Yeah. So it's all about knowing what your space is going to be. So this space is actually a tutorial. It teaches the players how to work together with that cube. I know it seems really simple, but there are a lot of complicated ideas that I was trying to convey. It's like, well, one, how do we make the cube interesting? How do we make the VR player want to pick it up? Do they already know how to pick it up? Stuff like that. And also, because we have this weird mishmash of giant VR character and tiny platforming character. How do I build that space to also feel good for them? Feel kind of like get in this Goldilocks zone of just the right size or whatever. That's kind of what your blockout phase is for. It's really, you don't want to spend time on art. I know that I have this, tower in the middle that, is all textured up and stuff. I'd actually just come off of the jungle level, and that was a piece of architecture that was in a more, I will say, a more finished state. So I just brought it into this area, which is why, it looks a little more complete than everything else. But that's really kind of the whole idea of a blockout. Sometimes you might hear it referred to as a block mesh. It is really just creating a very simplified game space, and you can jump in, test it. Is it too big? Is it too small? Whatever mechanics you're using in that space, are they do they play well? Is the area even fun to interact with? Like, is the space inviting? Just all of these kind of things. Really, it's a very iterative process. I'm kind of bummed out we don't have any, and this is my fault. I'm kind of bummed out we don't have more like screenshots from the iterative side of things, because like areas can change and get kind of like reworked as we kind of like test internally and stuff like that. So
I know on our Twitter there's a GIF of one of the blockouts that changed. If you go back to around November.
Yes.
Of last year, there is a GIF on our Twitter of like a blockout of the jungle level that's actually in the demo that you have right now.
I would like to take this moment to say, go find our Twitter and go follow us and look at that. Anyway, yeah, that's
in the game.
Yeah, thank you. That's kind of the gist of blocking stuff out, though. It's all about rapid prototyping and rapid testing and rapid iteration.
And so after Justin finishes blocking it out, that then gets passed on back to Elliot, who then has a task of figuring out what does this block or mesh, what does it actually look like in the game. So he has to come up with an idea of like what that could look like. Elliot?
Yeah, and if you were wondering on that last screenshot what that green sun was, that was just like, that was a vanishing point for like perspective lines that I had put in there, so that I could start painting over it like this. And yeah, you're just painting on it. It's kind of some of the most fun if you're an artist, because you can just kind of like, well, okay, let's just go crazy for a second and take the essence of what's there, the blocks that are there, because it's just a pathway. But is it a suspended rope bridge? Is it a series of platforms? You have a lot of freedom in this stage to determine just a lot of the character and a lot of like the functionality of the space, both within like the realm and sort of influencing, I guess, how the puzzle like works in a little way, but how it fits in the overall world. So you can see that like that tower that he had dropped in, just quickly prototyping, it was cut in half at the top there, and it became like sort of like a platform that you could see this sort of decorative doorway that would be opened by a certain sort of mechanism. There were some red lines on the prior shot, and the only instruction there was that those are just these are chains. So just figured out something with that, and and so I was like, okay, well, just here's an idea for a suspended bridge. It doesn't have to say that way. But that is also an example of something that would be brought out individually to be sort of figured out in a more finalized way. Does it have railings? How big are the chain links? Is there like a crank at the top or something? Like how does that look? And you just kind of do the best you can, trying to bring it to somewhere that looks like it's final. This is what the game would look like in a finished, if, after all the art pass is done. And Des, I think this is your part where we actually start building some of the assets.
Yeah, so naturally, when it comes to starting to building the assets, you just kind of start. But that's a big problem when it comes to scaling. You can bring it into the scene and it could just be off, and you then naturally want to just scale it up. But then you run into problems. Then Justin will tell me, hey, the scaling's off. It's causing me a lot of problems. Usually he can fix it though, because he does know all this stuff. So Justin like is fine with it. But in general, you want to make it easy on them, and like go ahead and find your unit of measurement, which we use meters, and just kind of have that base model that you use to look at all the scale of everything. So for this game, I use our character Kana and I just drop her into any scene to make sure she's looking good, the model's looking good next to her.
And yes, she is 2 meters tall. Deal with it.
Yeah, I wish we were in feet, but it's all right. But yeah, so this is just a more in-depth look of, does it look right? A lot of this stuff you can just eyeball, but at the same time, you also want to, I kind of stand up sometimes. I'm like, all right, how tall is she to me? So how tall is this asset? Yeah, that's good on this one. And also like a time saver thing is, to try to use the same assets over and over again. Essentially, you want to add diversity. This is what you see here with the pillars in a different color. And even this plant here that's in the front, that came in a pack that was like $5-10 on the Unity store. Just anything you can do to make things go faster. I know you guys do that all the time in writing code. So bring that here when it comes to dragging and dropping and reusing. It's just gonna get you to a finished place faster.
Yep, and that's the thing where like there's this balance in the budget between bespoke content, which is made by the modeling team, and putting in more foliage and other things that you can grab from elsewhere as long as it fits within your art style. So obviously, like you can't just go out and just grab assets from wherever and bring them together and get a cohesive art style. And that's why most of our content actually is bespoke and made by our art team as a whole. So like Elliot's been a big driver of that, of creating that direction with the models. But so this is right here, we've got talked through like reiterating and using, but then like once we have stuff in there, we also want it to be able to move. So Des?
Yeah, so and then so this is the asset that we bought, but I can still go in and animate it. So just this part was just to feel things alive. Like if these things were just sitting here, what kind of environment would that feel like? It wouldn't really feel like a lived-in environment. So I decided to we need these things animated, and when it comes to the different labels you see here, I just have different levels of wind for each for any occasion. If she steps on the plant itself, it has an animation. It's not linked up here because again, that's not what I do. I just brought it in here to see it. But yeah, and another good thing about these, I hand animate them so they loop. So they loop. You can loop any of the animations into each other, and yeah, and so this animation too. This is a palm tree that's blowing in the wind, and it has the same thing as you saw. This is a big long animation, but it has 3 loopable sections in it, and these are 3 different versions of that tree. So same model, just got deformed in 2 different ways. And the way I create the animation, there is no rig for the animation, but I don't know, maybe look up blend shapes. Blend shapes is a form of 3D animation that's more deforming. Through blend shapes, I use the animation from one of the trees and copy and pasted that into the other 2. So even though they're all different models per se, without rigs, they still share the same animation. So that saves time.
And then so after the art team goes through, Elliot's gone through, done the paint over, and then passed it on to Des and Kat, we get this beautiful scene. We've done the animations and all those things, and you can really see how it comes together when really it started with that block out that was just a bunch of Pro Builder squares that you saw earlier. So you can really see like how iterative it's done. And so this, we even like the block out and without an art pass is actually in the demo that you have, because we created that demo to get outside input on it. So we'll talk about that process in a little bit, but first we want to move on to the engineering team and talk through some of the engineering challenges about our game. So it looks like there's something in the chat.
Justin.
Oh,
Just me
that's
trolling.
Justin. Nice. All right, Jonathan, go ahead.
Hey, what's up? So I'm Jonathan. I am the engineering team. It's just me. So yeah, Min is a very unique game and does bring with a lot of unique challenges. It's an asymmetrical VR game, meaning one player is all VR headset, VR controllers with all those design and hardware constraints. And the other player is, they're pancake. They're playing on the screen. They have like an Xbox, PlayStation controller in their hand. The first thing that we actually tackled is the sound system. We need to have a separate sound system, separate sound effects and music and everything for just the VR player, and the same with the pancake player. And it's a very strange problem to have because there's tons of apps that will you think about Discord, Zoom, Teams, whatever. Tons of apps on your computer already have dual audio outputs, but very few game engines support that, if at all. A lot of people would have asked me in the past, well, what about PlayStation 3? They do that, right? They have a speaker on the controller, and that's actually Sony's proprietary drivers. When you use their SDK, do that. So that's not even the same thing. You feed their system the sound effects, and they figure out how to play it. So in our case, we use Fmod that handles all of our dynamic sound, real-time modulation, real-time spatialization. And luckily we found some obscure forum post where someone else had the same idea of having dual outputs. And it ended up being one of those things where it doubled our code base, but it was literally just because we had to copy and paste their C# wrapper. And that was just the way you did it. So I was like, hey, we got it working. And I was like, wow, hope this never breaks. So moving on, the other thing was control systems, because yeah, we have 2 players. You have Xbox controller and Oculus controller, and that's what we started with. For Oculus Launchpad, it was only the Oculus headset. And doing it with an Xbox or a PlayStation controller and only an Oculus headset is actually super easy, because all that's handled for you by the Oculus drivers. They'll let you get all 3 controllers at once, and it's super easy. It's a unified API. Nice. The problem came when we added Steam VR. So we didn't add Steam VR until after Launchpad. Something we keep in mind about the timeline is that when at Launchpad, you have to make your demo in 3 months and you pitch it. Then if you get accepted as part of the grant, you have 4 deliverables you have to meet over the next course of the year. So all your restrictions, you heard oh, we had to have only 5 people on the team. Oh, we have to be on Oculus. It has to be on the Rift. It was not allowed to be on the Quest. Those were only for the initial demo. Now the rules are off, now that we are in the milestone deliverable stage. So we even asked, like, can we do Steam VR? And they're like, yeah, sure, man, go for it. I'm like, all right, cool. This will double our user base. If anyone's ever mucked around with Steam VR's controller inputs and Oculus's controller inputs, they are night and day radically different. Oculus is more traditional style. It's old school. You have your list of your button inputs you want to pull for, and you check those. Steam VR is more similar to the new style OpenXR kit, where your game does not check for inputs. Instead, you just have a list of what inputs your game would like to have, and you'll check for that list. So on Oculus, it's like I have to check if the A button is pressed. And for me, I know that means jump. But on Steam, I say, hey, I have a jump action, and I need it to be a button. Can Steam please give that to me? Yes, please, thank you. So it's this huge hassle of having to integrate that system and marry it with Oculus. So we have like an Oculus controller remapper that only exists for the Oculus subset, whereas Steam VR has its own built-in controller mapper. And the nice thing, it sounds like a huge hassle. Like, why would you ever want to work with Steam VR if that's such a pain in the ass? However, the flip side is like, look at the Vive one. Holy, how are you going to like mash buttons together on that? Or do you want to support Knuckles? No, you don't. With Steam VR, we don't have to support any controller. We just support Steam VR, and Steam VR is supposed to pop up an instance and allow their users to map the controllers how they want. So it's a nice thing. It's like you do the work here to support their API so you can wash your hands of it. But before anyone goes and dives down that route, fun fact, Oculus actually supports Vive natively under the hood. The only thing they don't support is the A button on the Knuckles controller. And that's, according to the comments in the Steam VR SDK on GitHub, is broken. And they said, to do, we'll fix. And that comment is 4 years old. They ain't gonna get fixed. Maybe for Half-Life 3, but anyway, nothing. You can see my battle scars over integrating Steam VR with how much I've rambled about it. So the other engineering challenges we came into, we used a grab and pull locomotion technique. Like the VR player grabs and kind of climbs and crawls around the level. We did that because there's a lot of players don't like smooth movement. I know that's become more widespread acceptable now in the VR scene to have that, but there's still a lot of people that they get motion sick from it. And we want our game to be accessible to everyone. And so we decided, like, all right, instead of that, we're going to do a climbing mechanic, because climbing mechanics tend to work really well for a lot of people because your brain will tie the muscle memory into the eye speed. And your brains like to have confirmation on 3 senses whenever you're moving around. So you have, inner ear, your eyes, and your muscles. Well, in VR, you don't have your inner ear, but if you have your muscles, your brain says, okay, 2 out of 3 is good. And that was kind of our system for that. The only really real engineering challenge with that is just how do we make it convenient to use for Justin? Because like when we started out, I had a script he had to put on every single collider in the level, and
it was awful.
It was pretty awful. And I've retooled it now, so now it's just like, yeah, anything is grabbable by default, which is now causes hilarious bugs when he forgets to like blacklist certain things that should not be climbed on. The last thing, and this isn't really an engineering challenge, but definitely a bonus, automated builds. Huge, massive shout out to game.ci. It's a community open source project that's just a collection of build scripts. If you're on like GitHub, for example, they very much have like, hey, drop this script into your project folder and GitHub will automatically build it for you. So whenever you commit code or submit a pull request, boom, here's a fresh build of your game. Now, if you're just on like a free tier, GitHub does not like to store gigs and gigs of artifacts. However, we just use it just as a build check, as if like you cannot submit a pull request into the master branch, which is our release branch, if it won't build. And that's saved our bacon a couple different times. Usually what happens is if someone's doing a pull request that's all art, for some reason, that seems to be the linchpin with code where like, hey, this is art, there's like 5,000 JPEGs in here, this is fine. And then like hidden at the very bottom was like, oh yeah, Git vomited all over this one code file. And so won't compile anymore. So definitely automated builds. I know they're like bread and butter and completely boring everywhere else, but with Unity, it's still like a relatively new field because Unity has never really supported it well. You've been technically able to do automated Unity builds since like 2004 or whenever, 2014, sorry, I'm not that old. but there hasn't really been a community to support it because Unity themselves would rather you pay them to use their automated system instead of DIY it. But why bother when you can just use existing systems out there? I could ramble forever about anything, but I think that's it for me. And if people want to ask questions after the presentation, I'll happily just talk.
All right, awesome. So that's going to bring us to the next part, which is after we make our initial level, which is called the vertical slice. So the vertical slice is normally, when you talk about a vertical slice, it actually is after the art pass is complete. We actually got to the point where we were testing without doing a full art pass. And the reason for that is because testing in VR is hard. And the reason it's so hard is often people have never experienced the medium before. So our studio has been making games in VR since 2015, and prior we've done a lot of different things. We've worked with Bose, we actually work with other clients. So that's like Nexus Studios, as well as like Facebook Reality Labs, IGT, even did consulting for other big companies that we unfortunately can't talk about because they're under NDA. And like, the interesting thing about VR is when you bring someone into something they've never experienced before, you're actually signing a contract with them, and that's called the fidelity contract. And you don't really know what you're agreeing to with that particular user. So one example of a fidelity contract would be if you advertise the game and it's got a bunch of fluffy bunnies in it, and then they put on the headset and they're playing with bunnies, but then all of a sudden there's a zombie that's trying to eat them. It's going to scare them. And they're going to be like, I signed up to pet fluffy bunnies. Why am I now being chased? And you've actually broken that fidelity contract because you've broken the agreement between you, the developer, and what you told them they were going to experience and what they are going to experience. So the problem with that contract is you can have your intent about what you're trying to communicate to the user, but users bring in their own lived experiences, their own cultural background, their own personal knowledge, their own socialization and culture into your game, whether you want to or not. And it's even more powerful inside virtual reality when that happens. So as soon as the user is in your game, you have no idea what they're going to do, what they're going to try and do. There was actually a talk at 2019 MIT Reality Hack where Cy Wise, so at Cyteratops, you should follow her. She's an expert in the field. She summed it up better than I ever could by just saying humans are monsters and they will try everything. So you actually might know Cy from a little game called Job Simulator. So they actually did that as well as the Rick and Morty virtual reality, and then left after they sold their company to Google to then go over to Absurd Joy, where they started their own company and are now making awesome VR content playable for the masses. So definitely keep an eye on them and follow at Cyteratops because she's awesome and there's so much you can learn from her. But her main thing and the tenets she kind of harped on were to always have your developers watch the user and keep an eye on them. But the problem is how do you do that when like normally you can keep an eye on them because like you go to something like PAX East here in Boston, or even like the MIT, I think it was like 3 or 4 years ago, where there actually was an expo at MIT specifically like for virtual reality. And then there's also like Boston Fig is often at MIT, so that's like another great place to demo. But one of the main ones our studio does is PAX South, and has done in the past, where you can get a good like 100 people in a day if you have like multiple setups and can get people through like 2 to 3 minute demos, and you're just like churning people and the like full capacity, right? And so like with that and going through lots of conferences, I feel like 2017 was our year of conferences where there's so many where I kind of lost track at how many we were going to, where like you just get so many people that you find out everything that's broken with your game. And that's the power of conferences. And you actually usually come out of conferences being super stoked, super excited, just be like, here's everything we're going to fix. And it's a real like morale booster for the team. which like is a whole nother thing. We start talking about like team and energy dynamics and kind of keeping motivation going. Like that's a whole nother thing, because you see these facial expressions of people when they go wow, or like just look and say like great graphics. And that's the important part about testing in VR, is you're not just looking for the moments where they're happy, you're also looking for the moments where they're sad, when they're disappointed, when their face goes oh. And like, you know, that there was something that they were expecting, and that comes back to that fidelity contract where they're expecting something from the environment that you created, and then when they interact with it, you disappointed them. And you want to avoid that as much as possible, and the only way to do that is to watch them. And in Sai, in her talk, she says you have two engineers, not like a sales or marketing person, not the producer, two engineers watch the player, and you're not even allowed to have your phone because you don't want to miss a single second of it. And that's normally how you should be testing VR, is watching every single second of the user. But the problem is that during a pandemic, that becomes a much more difficult task, because you can't be in the same room, you can't invite people to your studio, you can't go to conferences, everything is just completely canceled and thrown out of whack. So now like you have a whole new task where you can't go to the events where the people are, you need to bring the people to you. And like for us, that hub of like where we brought our testers to was Discord. And Discord, and then using Twitter to just kind of promote everything and get people into very simple forms. We're only asking for your email, and it's so we can give you access to Google Drive, so we can give you the build. If you're Oculus, we're actually sending it directly through Oculus, but if they're using like Steam VR, we were actually sending them builds through Google Drive. So we had this like hybrid approach for depending on like what platform people are on and what they're using. We had instructions that walked people through how to set up their recordings. And so the recording is just like, honestly, we didn't realize how valuable they would be until we had them. And it's like to go that. So this is like an example of a recording of a playthrough. So you have the VR player over here on the left, where we can see their view, but we also had like the non-VR player view on like the main screen here. So we get both players' perspectives. We actually recorded both like the PC mic in addition to the VR headset mic, so you could get both of those inputs. And like to try and reach out and get people to like reel in our testers, we tried a bunch of different things. So here's like me sharing kind of what we learned. More than anything else is that GIFs are king on social media, and that's both by favor of the algorithms on Twitter and Facebook, but it's also just by like how you get people's attention. This gets into kind of basic psychology, even on just like what attracts people's attention. So on the very far left, you can see we just like put a link and are like, hey, here, come and do this. You can see there's only 12 engagements and only 850 people saw it. But as soon as we put an image on that, which is basically the exact same tweet, only a few days later, we put an image with it, got a whole lot more engagements, got a lot more retweets. Like you can see the impressions, which is how many people like actually like had it show up in their feed, just went like into the thousands. So you're looking at 4 times like what we had before. And then for the video itself, you can actually see the impressions. This is actually why it's even more interesting, because you see less people actually saw it, but of those people, now you're looking at like 3 times actually ended up engaging with it, and actually like clicking and going through. So like you can see just how much more like that video made a huge difference in people's willingness to like actually click on and interact with like the link itself. And that link was basically just how all we did was get like your name and your email, and that was it. So like here's like just some like basic kind of stuff where it's just like, it was, I think on the Twitter on the right, there's like a week worth of engagement and stuff where you can see the total, whereas over here on Facebook, it was like a specific ad campaign where you can see we reached like 9. So total, you have like 12,000 plus like almost 1,200 over here. So you're looking at like 13,500 plus kind of people. This resulted in 20 testers total that actually ended up playing our game and going through the demo. So that if that gives you a mind of how many people you need to reach in order to get people to engage, and asking people to engage on a demo and go to your Discord is like a whole different ask than asking them to just buy and play a finished game. So you're looking like for a very specific type of person to begin with. So don't get too discouraged about like potential sales and things like that when it comes to like how many people do you need to get your game in front of to get that like funnel into where you're trying to get the user to go. And for us, we are just trying to get them to play the game so we can then have them record it and give feedback. Yes, Trent?
I'm just checking the battery on my computer.
Oh, yep. So I will try and hurry up if that is a concern.
Wait, Craig, how did you get involved with the team? I don't think we heard how you got involved with the team.
There's a whole story I forgot to tell.
Yeah, Justin, you want to go?
The really short version is a lot of us have known each other for like a decade at this point.
Yeah, so Justin's actually been with Digital Precept since it was founded in 2015. Even before he actually started playing around with Unity, he was helping us like at PAX South while we were demoing things. So Justin's basically been a friend that I've known for a very long time. And so it just made sense that after he got that grant, I'm like, well, so you could develop it by yourself, or you could use like a known studio and develop it under the studio. And the reason, like the big benefit there, A, in addition to like the legal protections that come with that, but B, there are 1.2 billion things that have absolutely nothing to do with game development.
Yep.
That like have to be done in order to do anything. And Justin's like, I just want to make games. I don't want to have to do any marketing. I don't want to have to do any legal stuff. I don't want to have to handle contracts. I don't want to have to handle like budgets or bank accounts or the IRS or any of those kinds of things. And Digital Precept, like, which at the time was co-owned by Jonathan and I, were just like, all right, Justin, just like makes sense. Let's make this happen and bring the game under the studio roof and just add it to our list of things we've done, right? So, and yeah, so that's like where I come in, is kind of giving that foundation to bring this team in and bring this team together and bring all the rights under one roof, because like, yeah, and that's like where it comes in. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it was going to get complicated because it's like I could spin up my own studio and that would be its own headache, or, by our forces combined, I could just join Digital Precept. So, it kind of worked out for everybody, less competition, and otherwise it was just going to be a gigantic mess. So
I had one question for
We had a question, but
Yep.
I guess for everyone, not any person in particular, but what made you excited to work on this game with Justin? Like, what specifically drew you to this one project?
Can you megaphone that, Trent? We couldn't hear.
he was asking what drew you to the project, like what made you want to work on this game?
Wait, specifically not Justin. Not that Justin can't answer the question, but he was wondering the people who joined on later, what drew you to the project?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, for me, it was definitely like, honestly, like I wanted to work on it from the beginning, but it was just like basically for the needs of the project, when Justin had to limit it to 5 people, he's like, I don't need a whole nother engineer. So like having me on in the original 5 just didn't make any sense. So basically I just kind of supported from afar and like answered any questions that kind of came up. And just like cheerleaded, just be like, yeah, do it. Like, this is your chance to do this. And, but the thing is like, as it came together, as the Launchpad project came together, and like, I fell in love with like the art style in Ava and Kana. And I really saw the potential for this asymmetric gameplay concept that Justin had come up with to be something that can actually like bring people closer together by going through a lived experience together and like exploring and solving these puzzles. And it's really a way for people to like be in the same room and like just interact and laugh with each other. And that's one of the things that we get in the recordings and the testing are like just hearing people laugh and hearing people make jokes at each other and jab at each other and like investigate things that in ways that happen only with VR rather than anything else. And there are very few asymmetric games in Oculus right now. So there are two main ones that are out there, but this one is even unique from the ones that are already out there in that it offers a lot more exploration, as well as like, yeah, there's a lot of really interesting design concepts here. So I could go on for a very long time on like why I've always been a fan of Mend, even before like officially joining the team. But I will throw over to Desmond to see what drew him in.
Plus,
Yeah,
I
I
like to think I
definitely.
asked very nicely. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean that does help. But yeah, no, I was excited to answer this question because I mean I will say I wasn't hooked for a minute. I mean I made models for men before I even played the game. But there were like the pillars that he talked about were all things that I was super interested in. One, non-violent game. You know, it's just I personally crave creativity, and I feel like every game is violent. I just feel like there's so much potential for a game that doesn't have it. Not that every game is violent. There are non-violent games out there. Also, the co-op aspect of it, and not even just the asymmetrical part, but co-op, especially couch co-op games, are some of my favorites to play. So it was these personal things that did get me with what we were making, right? But also the team, like it's just a team in general. As you know, there's not a whole like there's an art school here in Memphis, but there's not a big art, 3D art scene and digital art scene in general when it comes to 3D and video games. So I got tired of working by myself, and this was a great team. Like just to be honest, like I seen what they do individually, and I was like, and that's I feel like one of the main drivers of it is just like, oh, there's great people on this project. I need to be on it.
Yeah. Any other questions before we proceed?
I mean, if we could hear from Catherine, Elliot, and Jonathan, if they wanted to weigh in on.
Yeah.
I can
Catherine.
go ahead and weigh in.
Jonathan, Marlon, go ahead.
Similar to what Desmond said at the end, I've known Justin and the rest of them for about, well, Justin specifically, I think we started playing games online around 2012 or 2013.
Wasn't it Minecraft?
It was either Minecraft or Dota.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay. That's been a minute.
Yeah. And Shrek, we've actually known each other since we were 11. So basically for your entire lives. I was just thinking of that. And so basically, if Justin or Shrek asks me to write music for a thing, I will write music for that thing.
Plus, it's your background, right?
Yeah, I've always been in music. It's my degree, and I've been trying to break into composition in the industry since about 2015, off and on. It's not my day job, so it hasn't been a huge thing.
And Catherine?
What got me onto this project was definitely the team, and as well as just the accessibility of in like the asymmetric capabilities of it. You can play with your friend that may not have a VR headset, and if your friend has a VR headset, you can play with them. And there's you can. It's accessibility, the art style, the team is great. It's just a really fun project to work on, and VR is awesome, and doing like kind of a little bit of both is cool too. So yeah.
Elliot?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I really like the idea of the asymmetric as well when I first heard about it, because I've been watching VR for a while, but it's so expensive right now, even still. And me and a bunch of friends would like always want to play, but none of us had headsets before I was on this team, with buddies that I had grown up with and went to college with. And an idea to kind of get co-op multiplayer, which is really fun multiplayer that you don't see enough of, mixed in with VR as well, but like only one person has to own a headset. I think that was like a really fun idea that really hooked me in early on and really wanted me to give me like, oh, okay, I want to jump in here and help sort of make this like a really cool experience. And I know Justin from Interact from the game jams, local game jams around, and it was just that through that networking experience, essentially, just that they knew of me and they reached out to me and asked me to be part of the team, and I'm glad they did.
And Jonathan Shrek.
Yo, so I was the first person Justin recruited for this project, so I didn't know if I was allowed to answer the question or not.
No.
I gotta give the lame answer is that I'm just a super nerd programmer, and I really just love programming and game development. And so when Justin was like, "Hey, I have this idea. I think it's gonna be really difficult, and it's gonna be co-op. It's gonna be asymmetrical. It's gonna be VR." I'm like, "Done. Let's do it. Fucking rock, man." And that's the thing is, I grew up with like a younger brother and playing co-op games on the couch all the time. So it's just like, oh yeah, I love co-op games. It's like that's all you need to tell me. I was like, I'm down. As far as like what gets me excited about it, it's just like this is where I have to delve into like my like personal career. Like because I've done enterprise VR for 4 years now, and I'm used to being like on all these big corporate teams where it's like there's like 30 programmers and not a single artist, and then having like the management be like, oh well, this looks bad, you need more mouth noise in here, or I say mouth noise because they would always be like, blah, it needs more pizzazz. And now it's like, oh my god, there's artists, this is fantastic, holy cow, now it doesn't look like it's made by a programmer that can barely write his name. It's great. So yep, no, that's my unconventional answer. You can also just copy paste everyone else's answer and say it was mine.
Wait, real quick, I want to say, like, I don't know if y'all were looking for some like economic or strategic answer to that question, but yeah, it seems like all of our answers were quite personal. It's just like we just like the stock, you know.
We like the stock.
We like the stock. Kind of on my end, to give you my perspective, because I did kind of like reach out to everybody. Again, like I've worked with all of these people before in some way, shape, or form, and I knew what they were all capable of. So, for me, it was just a very natural thing of, going to each person and be like, hey, I'm putting a team together. You want in?
Yep. Any other questions, Trent? We're almost done here.
No, we were just pretty happy with the answers, and we wanted to tell Desmond that we weren't really looking for any specific answer, but they were all helpful.
Awesome.
Nice to hear that it was like a lot like this personal connection between Justin and like Jonathan, and also like it's cool, like asymmetric VR, that's like not really explored that much, and so I thought that was pretty cool that it has something special going for it there too.
If you couldn't hear that, he was really happy with you. So.
Awesome.
So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks.
Can I touch on something real quick,
Craig?
Craig?
Oh, go ahead, Jonathan.
So something talking about like the team size and something. And I don't think any of y'all do the launchpad, and if they still have the 5-person team limit, that was really frustrating because we couldn't ask for it. Like we couldn't use anything made by someone that wasn't part of that 5-person team, or we'd get disqualified. So it's like, I know Craig's like, oh, we don't need 2 engineers. And it's like, yeah, but Craig, like being like a project manager and a business analyst and everything else as a producer was an invaluable thing on the team. And we just didn't have one for like the initial demo concept. And that was rough. And then it was stuff like, people are like, oh, you only have a 5-person team. Why'd you recruit Jonathan Marlin? He's a musician. It's not a music game, right? I'm like, yeah, but I've never seen anyone greenlight a game that had 0 music in it. And I can't just say, hey, Jonathan Marlin, make me some music and slap it in there because I didn't want to get disqualified. So there comes this weird thing where it's like, we have all these people that we want to ask for help from, and we're just like, we have to like, we're forced to like hamstring ourselves and like cut our like left leg off to try to get this demo out there, which is like in itself is going to push you way outside your comfort zone to get that over the line. And then it's like the moment it's like, all right, we're in, all right, get the whole family in here. We're good to go now.
Yeah, so another big fact, especially more so in VR than anything else, is when it comes to music. I don't know if you've ever seen the Lord of the Rings, where they're like running on
Music
the
is
hill.
Mandatory. Like
and
any VR game, it's mandatory.
Yes.
Yeah, so the whole point of that is like, if you take out the music actually like distracts the player at least a little bit. And what I mean a little bit is it turns off the analytical part of the brain just a smidge enough, but to where if you take out the music, suddenly they're going to notice everything that's ever been wrong with your game and be like, why is this way? Why is this way? Whereas like by putting music over there, it almost like turns off that part of the brain to where just by adding music, someone's like impression is going to be that your game looks better and is nicer than if you didn't have music. And that's the thing, music is crucial, and our game would be like non-existent if it weren't for Jmar's music. So I
is it
definitely want to
better
throw
for-
that out there, and it's even more true in VR than it is in even like film.
Craig, do you think it's better for conference testing, to keep the music out because then you get more directed feedback from users? Or do you think having the
No, you
like shot
definitely
would be
want it
rough?
in there. So when you're testing with users and conferences, so there's a whole other thing that's in there, but you definitely want them to be testing what they'll be playing when you're not there, because you basically just want to watch and observe and see what the user does, and the user's going to be doing two different things if they have music versus if they don't have music. So you definitely want it in there. But that was a good point. But yeah, it's definitely, yeah, go ahead, Jmar.
I can also say, just to give you some feedback for the future, never write off audio. Like, as Craig was saying, music and sound are parts of the game. So you kind of want to make sure that you're not just leaving that as sort of an afterthought. Because, for instance, when you're testing, you might realize that the music is wrong for the game that you have. Like, I have to write the music based on the game. Like, obviously, this game wouldn't work if I had written like a death metal 130 BPM sort of track, no matter how awesome that track might be.
Too late. We're pivoting now.
I was going to say that Viking metal game. I look forward to that.
And
Hey, man,
because it's
I
a puzzle game, they need to be able to concentrate. So Jmar needs to craft the music around that specific requirement.
Yes, it's all about what the player is doing. Also, it is huge for game feel. I don't remember specifically what game this was. It was a shooter, but the players were sending in a lot of negative feedback about the shotgun. Like, it's underpowered, it doesn't do enough damage, and the designers went in.
This game is Mass Effect.
Oh, it's Mass Effect. Thank you.
This story is from Mass Effect.
Excellent. Thank you. So, the designers go in, change nothing about the weapon programmatically. It has the same spread, same damage, everything, but they added a beefier, chunkier sound audio engineering to the weapon, and then they tested that, and then everybody all of a sudden is like, oh, this is great. It's almost like it's overpowered. So yes, never underestimate music and audio engineering. It is huge for just overall game feel and user experience. Massive.
I got one last thing I want to add on to this one before I promise we'll stop talking about music. Jamer actually had a really salient point like months ago. He was talking about a video, Jamer, if you remember, it was a Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time randomizer, where it had taken all the dungeons in the game, randomized items, enemies, and songs. And that's when, like Jonathan Marlin pointed out, it's like some of these songs are like awkwardly too short for the room, and it's hard to explain why. I'm not a musician, so I can't even fathom it.
Yeah, that's another part of it. When you create music, like, you don't want to create 5 minutes of music for a hallway where they're going to spend 3 seconds. And just the opposite. You don't want to create a 3-second loop of music for the main hub of the level where they're going to spend hours.
Craig, do you want to finish up or wrap up?
Yep. Yeah. So we're almost done here. So yeah, we can definitely wrap it up. So here you can see like just a little cycle of like what that testing looks like. So like we finish our level, and then we're gonna send that out to all the users, and like had our different release channels. So that's on Google Drive and directly via Oculus if they wanted to share their Oculus email. So that was like another issue, is maybe they didn't want to share their Oculus email, so we can send it directly via Oculus. So we just added them to our Vive tester thing. But the other thing I wanted to add on here is the feedback from the videos that we went through and watched. From one playthrough alone, Justin made 7 pages of documentation that the rest of the team was then able to go in and see, and we had timestamps to the videos to be able to see, hey, here's this specific issue and do this. And in our like tester feedback in Discord, players were nice enough to upload their stuff and then tell us to basically be like, all right, now go to minute 237. I found this specific issue. And they were actually like doing some of that work for us to tell us where in the timestamps that the videos were. And the, like being able to have those recordings like completely like change the game for us, because I'm able to immediately like link Justin to, hey, here's an example of this issue. And the other thing that we recorded their voices so we could know like how they were thinking about the puzzles, and be like, why would they think that? And then you could change the design of the puzzles based on like how the user is thinking about it. Or maybe if something was like too bright, it might attract the user's attention in a way that like we don't want it to. So then we like are like, hey, Elliot, go ahead and like tone this color down so it doesn't call out to the user in a way that is currently happening in the build process. So with that, that's where you get to this final stage, that after we make pages and pages of documentation of all these things that like need to be changed or addressed, we then are able to like let the testers know like, hey, here's a bunch of like public bugs that are known that we're either currently working on, but also to like let other people come in and give us like more feedback. But then the main part is to take all of that and send it back through the entire pipeline again, if needed. So that could go straight to Justin just tweaking something in the level. That could be Elliot maybe having to reconcept something. Like ideally, like you don't actually go back to the concept phase of things. You just like tweak a specific model as needed or fix whatever like texture issues. And if it's an engineering bug, then obviously that gets tracked and Jonathan looks at it later is really what that comes down to. But the big thing that kind of came out of our testing was us having to really figure out the big things that we hadn't really thought about until we saw users have a problem with it. So like we knew this would be a problem, but we didn't know like how big of a problem. So if the users get really far away with from each other because we allow them to just free roam wherever, they would often lose each other and would be like, where are you? I don't see that. And without the recordings, I don't think we would have ever gotten that. And if we had just tried to do like a survey, I would say compared to recording, surveys are completely useless. Or just having the user tell you, yes, it was fun or no, it wasn't fun, isn't really going to help you fix your game. To really get kind of feedback you need to, because the user will only tell you what they think will help you. Whereas like the level designer going in and watching it versus the engineer going in and watching it versus the artist going in and watching it, we all have our different takeaways when we watch these videos, and we all have different things based on like our lens of development and the things that we care about. And that's where like these recordings, being able to see the VR player and the non-VR player having both mics so we can hear the players talk to each other, like that really allowed us to pinpoint down to like the subatomic level, like what needed to change in this game and in these levels to make them better. And so the other big thing is the players would often like communicate a lot, and we had to really like brainstorm and think about how can we improve their ability to communicate? So if Kane is trying to say, hey, place this block over there, or place this over here, and those are the two big things at the macro level that kind of came out of it, and obviously the 7 pages of kind of minutia that I won't bore you by. So we've received a lot since this. So the one that like is very obvious is being an Oculus Launchpad finalist in 2019, which is a grant recipient. And then for GDC Showcase, Facebook chose us for the Facebook virtual booth, and we're very proud to be a part of that. So we'll also be applying for other things, as well as trying to get on other platforms even, as kind of like a what's next for Mend. And I definitely want to thank everyone for coming, and please join our Discords and be ready for our next round of testing. So feel free to play the demo that's there tonight. But at Mend the Game on Twitter, and if you go to playmend.com, there's actually a link to our Discord in there. So we don't have a fancy server where you can just go straight to it. But if you go to playmend.com, there's a join our Discord link in there.
I've also dumped the Discord link in chat.
Yep. So I definitely want to thank everyone for coming, and yeah, interest. And for anyone who wants to get into game dev, I'm very connected in the space, especially in VR, through not just Boston VR, but obviously the Boston Unity group is another group I recommend that you attend if you're interested in game dev. There's also Boston Postmortem, then Boston Indies, and like Boston's such a great place to be for game dev, because like Harmonix is based there as well, and there's a bunch of indie game studios that are also doing a bunch of really cool full-time work. Like Happy Giant is one of them that does both AR and VR, and so Firehose Games is also based out of there. And if you go further south, like Turbine is just around the corner. So Boston is like a really good place to be for both virtual reality, augmented reality, and indie games. So definitely take advantage of everything as you can. And Boston Fig is having like Boston Fig Talks, where I'll actually be expanding even going into more detail about this like testing. So I'm gonna hand it back over to the rest of the team if they have anything else they want to add, as well as any other questions before we wrap up. Thanks.
Right before we wrap up, I was just wondering if you guys wanted any help to build your game, because I would love to help. I'm super excited. This is like code for, can I send you guys my resume?
Yeah, so feel free to send the resume at the very least. I would love to like look it over and give you feedback. So one of the things is with like our budget is our budget, and we really don't really allow people to just like work for free, because we don't believe in that as a studio. But I'm happy to look it over and give any advice, as well as like if other people are asking for a Unity developer, I would definitely like keep you in the back pocket. So feel free to get in touch with me or get Trent and just send me an email, and I'll happily look it over.
That sounds cool. Yeah. Get in touch.
I had a question for Jonathan Schrack, just back on the development side of things. When you were talking about like doing the different inputs for Oculus versus Steam VR, I was just wondering, I guess, so you custom did it for, or like you did everything yourself for all the different
partially.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're working like a VR, there's the Oculus integration package for Unity, which is like all their kind of bespoke enhancements. And then there's the Steam VR integration package, which is all Steam's bespoke enhancements. The Aqueous one is nice. It works really great. It's solid, it's lean. Whereas the Steam VR one's a bit of a bloated hog at times. The problem we kind of ran into in previous projects is that it's not really great to have both of them at the same time. And since Steam VR was a second add-on, Steam VR one is the one that we DIY'd the entire thing and integrated it into the Oculus integration package itself. So, wait.
Interesting.
Did I answer your question or just go off topic?
No. That did. I was sort of also wondering, like, A lot of the stuff like I've done and some like the club stuff the club has done is using like other tools, using like the Unity XR pipeline and like the XR interaction toolkit, or like Microsoft's like MRTK. I was just sort of wondering your thoughts on like, it sounds like you did it all yourself, not using like the XR
So
pipeline.
in this case, I had already had an interaction rig I had built out before the official XR interaction kit was like a solid thing. So the one that we are using it's one that, yeah, I designed out myself. And it's interesting because this last game jam, I was like, I'm gonna sit down, I'm gonna learn how to use Unity's kit and just see how it works. And it's weird how like almost identical they are. I'm still not a big fan of Unity's. I feel like theirs is a problem of trying to be a Swiss Army knife. It's trying to do everything, and then doing so, I feel like I spent just as much time trying to figure out how to trick their system to doing what I wanted as I spent just making my own system. Now, that being said, no, just use their system. Like, don't waste the time making your own system. I wasted the time because when we started, it wasn't a thing, or it was still in like early preview beta. So we didn't want to like have to rely on something that was beta. If it's going to be beta and janky, it might as well be our own in-house beta jank.
Yeah. So you're just using like the Unity like legacy VR support, and then just using the different integration packages like entirely yourself.
Yes.
Right.
Another thing too, like that we ran into on a recent project, is that for whatever reason, the XR interaction, like the pure Unity XR kit and rig, doesn't always work. I have no idea why. Like if I use the Oculus on my desktop that I'm on right now, if I use the Oculus like prefab rig, it works flawlessly every time. If I use the Unity rig, it works 1 out of 3 times, where like the game will load and I can hear sounds and feel vibrations and everything, but it's just black on that headset. And I cannot for the life of me figure out why. And it's just a weird bug reports from other people saying the same thing, and don't know.
Yeah.
So again, it's like I feel like the Unity kit, it's not technically in beta anymore, but it still feels like it's in beta to me, just because of these weird edge cases that Murphy's Law says we have to run into.
Yeah, and I think that's part of what like drove our studio from the beginning, not to rely on things like VRTK, or
Don't you ever
like,
say VRTK again in this house.
it's just because it's almost like these tools are nice and they're great for prototyping, but as soon as like you want something to be production ready, it's almost like they aren't. And actually had this conversation with another engineer like actually just yesterday, specifically like just talking about the different interaction toolkits, as well as like the Unity's own, right? And we just agreed that it's always better to just like build your own for the most part.
But never start out building your own. Always use the pre-made stuff first. It's more important for you to prototype your ideas in a rough state to try them out than like spend a week making your own kit only to be like, oh wow, this sucks. Yeah.
Yeah.
Use
so
theirs to
like
prototype and then refine with your own version later.
Yeah, you want to see progress.
Yeah.
And see it quickly.
I've got like some super old videos of before Mend became Mend. And that was literally just like me shoving things into Unity and using like the most basic form of the Oculus API just to drive simple interactions. Seriously, yeah, prototyping is important. Never skip that step.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay. Do you want to play?
Yeah, we'll try to.
Okay, cool. Thank you guys so much for talking about your work. And we're gonna go play your game now. Well, is there anything you want us to keep in mind when playing your game? Can we?
A lot has changed is the first thing. Justin,
yeah.
Go ahead.
No. So Craig is absolutely right. A lot has changed, but I mean, don't really look for anything specifically. Really, just kind of go in and try and just play the game as you think it should be played. Because quite honestly, that's where I'm going to get the most useful feedback.
Sure. And if you guys ever want to follow up, we've got a ton of people that would love to test your game. So like, feel free to reach out to us again. And probably just through Craig or Trent or something, now that we've made that bridge. Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you.
It's actually like a long bridge of like presidents that I've been introduced to. So from like Jacob Lowenstein to Ishwar to Austin and now Trent. Yeah, it's cool like getting to see everyone kind of come into their own in the club and then see like where you go after. So yeah, this is definitely a very unique club, and I love everyone that's involved in it. And yeah, you guys are awesome, and yeah, it's always a pleasure to work with you.
Great. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks. So the presentation is actually awesome. Like I think we all really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Have a great night, guys.
Yeah.
By the way, would you guys want would you want us to put this recording, or would you like if we put this recording on our website?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
That's cool.
Please do.
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good.
Awesome.
Have a good night, guys.
Awesome.
Yeah, y'all too. Night, y'all.
Digital preset out.
Good night.
I guess I'll leave it open for Bowen.
Oh no, I've forgotten how to leave.
That's all good.
That was
All right.